Okay. Well, it's great to be with you. I see a lot of people out there, some faces I recognize. I thought this afternoon, for me, I'm on the East Coast, United States, I would talk for a little while. Most of you folks know me, some of you folks don't, so I'm going to give you a little bit of background. But what I would encourage and ask you to do is, I don't want to talk for too long. I don't want this to just be a monologue. Once you hear a little bit more about me and what I do, maybe ask some questions. And Pascal and I were already talking before the program started today. I do have a book in publication called The Brain Sutras, Keys to the Revealed Consciousness. And so some of you may have read that as well. And I welcome questions about that book also. So just a little bit of background, since I know not everybody out there is familiar with me. You guys who are familiar with me, I'll try to make this quick. So I realized today that it'll be 35 years ago this fall, that I moved to Center for Spiritual Awareness, just a mile away from where I am now. I live a mile away from there. And I moved there 35 years ago at the invitation of Roy Davis, and lived and worked there for 2 years, doing a rather intense meditation schedule, plus work there. And to make a long story short, I one day got the idea to go for a tour of a local hospital facility here, just 15 miles away in a local town. And it was a treatment center, drug and alcohol addiction treatment center. And I went for a visit and met the medical director, the psychiatric director. And I resonated with them and asked them if they would like me to come in as a volunteer and teach meditation to the patients there in the hospital. And they said yes. And I talked to Roy about it. And Roy said, absolutely, that would be a very good thing to do for a ministry. So I started to teach meditation in the hospital, and this was in 1983. So this was when meditation was, just sort of getting a little bit of traction. But by and large, it was relatively unknown, particularly in treatment centers. So anyway, I started doing that and started to see great results with the people who were coming to the meditation classes. And the medical director in the hospital was very impressed, and he asked me if I would design a larger program that would run alongside their treatment program. And again, I talked to Roy about that, and he encouraged me and gave me some advice and told me some other things I could look into. And what eventually happened was, we were using this meditation model. And I should also say that this facility used the 12 steps of addiction treatment. So one of the steps in the 12 steps is through prayer and meditation, I will achieve conscious contact with my higher power. So I felt like meditation fit right in with the 12-step program, but I also realized that I needed to bring more scientific credibility and validity to the meditation model. Up until then, there was sporadic research here and there, nothing too profound at that point, although the Transcendental Meditation organization run by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he was really innovative. He had a lot of physicians working for him, and he immediately started to do different types of research on meditation and what happens physiologically with the meditation process. So I was fascinated by that, and I realized very soon while I was working there at the hospital that we could use techniques like biofeedback to speed up the process that a meditator's physiology goes through in terms of relaxation and de-stressing. But I also realized too that the key to the meditation process, at least what the transcendental meditation folks had found, was the brain. That the most remarkable changes that seemed to occur with meditators were measurable in the brain. So back then, there was something, a type of biofeedback just emerging, very new, called brainwave biofeedback. So it was a method to put sensors on the scalp that would measure the brain waves, the EEG, and then use that information as feedback that you could give to the person in order to direct them to deeper states of consciousness, or there's many things you can do by using by directing the brain to certain areas and certain frequencies. But in particular, I was most interested in the meditation model. What happens in the meditator's brain over time, and what really is the basis in terms of this electrical activity that we can measure. So what is the basis for higher states of consciousness? And that really became my mission. But along the way, what started to happen as I was treating people in the hospital, and I also had a private practice, was that there are various problems, like physical problems, mental problems, emotional problems, everything from irritable bowel syndrome to chronic migraine headaches to post-traumatic stress disorder to anxiety and depression and addiction, of course. These things started to remediate and clear up, as they will do with meditation over time. But what we were finding was, by pinpointing certain areas of the brain and really reinforcing very specific brain changes, that you could see an effect occur, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. And I realized that was the process that meditators go through as well, particularly, meditators who really stick with the program. Many of us see all kinds of problems clear up as we go through the process. So after several years of that, I moved around the country, ended up in Santa Barbara, California, opened up an institute out there, and began to work more and more with people who were interested in the meditation model. How do we facilitate the changes that occur in the meditator's brain? And I'm sure all of you are aware now, if you keep up with the research, it's quite clear. And I should say here too, that I think one of the most profound things I've ever heard was a Yogananda quote that was actually recorded and played in the documentary movie Awake, the documentary movie about Yogananda. And there's just a 45-second segment where Yogananda says, the brain and the spine is the altar of God. And I'd heard that from Roy Davis, and I'd read that, but I began to realize that is a profound statement and quite literal, that when we begin to understand the brain and the spine and what's actually happening, yes, they're physical structures, but what Paramahansa Yogananda was pointing out, it is where this pure consciousness enters in and is processed and conditioned and then distributed throughout the body and becomes us. So the brain and the spine held this sort of mysterious, or in effect is sort of this mysterious filter that takes this pure consciousness and then modifies it, restructures it, and it becomes us. It becomes our behaviors, our thoughts, our attitudes, our likes, our dislikes, and so on. What gets in the way of that pure consciousness and the manifestation of it, God realization, self-realization, God realization, is all of the stuff that gets programmed into the brain and nervous system that lies in between if you read an autobiography of a yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda says that the brainstem, the medulla, is where this life force, this pure consciousness enters the body, and then from there is distributed to the rest of the brain in the body. So in between this life force entrance, also known as the mouth of God in Sanskrit, and how it's manifested is the brain, trillions and trillions of brain cells and neural pathways that are conditioned, as I said, by many things, our environment, how we're raised, what we've been exposed to, what we learn, and of course our karma. So part of my mission, I know I'm making a long story out of something very short. My mission, myself and my wife, who is also a neuroscientist, has been to use this information to facilitate this clearing up, which of course is the whole point of meditation and Kriya Yoga. But this clearing up, this unveiling, so that we can move the individual from the identification with all of the stuff, the modifications, the mental modifications, the memories, and so on. So we can move the individual from the identification with that to the identification with the source, hence completing Yogananda's statement, the mind and the brain are the altar of God. So we moved back here to North Georgia, and we've created this full circle. We're coming back to the meditation model, coming back to using our knowledge or information, what we know about the brain, the nervous system, combining that with the sacred teachings. Kriya Yoga, of course, is our tradition, and showing how we can finally merge science and spirituality. Not finally, I mean, Einstein predicted this too, that sooner or later these things were going to merge. And sure enough, when we look around us now, we see that that is happening. It's accelerating quite rapidly. Obviously, too, we're also in a very challenging time period right now. The way that our individual nervous systems respond to this kind of situation that we're in right now needs to be really understood. And we as yogis really have the tools available to us to create more resilience and to really keep the body from going into some of the stress mechanisms possible with this pandemic that's happening. I felt it only appropriate to speak a little bit on this today because it's so prevalent around us. So the problem is with this kind of a collective threat, the problem is that our brains still have some very primitive structures in them that are constantly scanning for threats in the environment. And then when appropriate, or sometimes even when inappropriate, these areas of the brain get triggered. And of course, when they're triggered, they begin to sort of use the word trigger again. They trigger a cascade of neurochemicals and neurohormones in the body that ultimately lead to things that we don't want them to lead to. Lowered immunity, heightened stress response, activation of sympathetic nervous system, and so on. It's only appropriate given the threat, but we know better. We know that that's not a good thing. And there are three responses that get triggered, and I'm sure most of you have heard of the fight or flight response. So when there's this kind of a threat, the body's first reaction is to fight or to run away. It wants to take some kind of action. The neurohormones, neurochemicals are dumped into the bloodstream and the rest of the body so that the body can prepare. But there's another response that goes along with the fight or flight response, which is problematic, and that is the freeze response. We can interpret freeze as feeling the actual feeling of helpless and hopeless. And I've talked to a lot of people done quite a few interviews now, past few weeks, and this is quite challenging because there are some people who are in situations and circumstances that hopelessness and helplessness becomes sort of a daily fight they have to go through, trying to maintain a sense of inner peace, inner balance, and contentment. But when I'm asked, what is the most important thing that we can do, my answer is always meditation, because meditation is an opportunity, for however long we sit, whether it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. Meditation, especially when we do it correctly, tells the body, and remember, there's parts of the body that are really freaking out, but when we meditate, we tell the body that everything's okay. Everything's okay. And the more we meditate and the more advanced we get with meditation, the more we start to tap into superconscious states and feelings of peace and inner peace and so on and so forth. And these are profoundly cleansing to the body and have a remedial effect, lowering the stress chemicals, the neurochemicals and neurohormones, as well as boosting the immunity. And I'm sure most of you have heard of the phrase neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity refers to the fact that the brain is this plastic organ and is basically modified by our thoughts and our intentions. So yes, negative thoughts, depressive thoughts, and so on do modify the brain, but at the same time, positive thoughts, thoughts of contentment. There were studies done on Buddhist practitioners of compassion meditation and showed that the parts of their brain associated with the emotion of compassion were quite bigger than the average or the normal person. So meditation gives us the opportunity to really let the body know that everything is okay. You really have to remind the body of that, given the situation we're in, and at the same time, we have to be wary. There's one of the yamas and niyamas is a brahmacharya, which essentially means sort of the conservation of vital force, of energy. So we really we need our vital force. We need our prana. We need our prana to be strong as we face, weeks, months, if not years of potential threat in the environment. So we need to have strong prana, but that means that we have to learn how to cultivate our vital force. And I just want to speak briefly on that. There is a couple of things. First of all, we have to start realizing when we're losing vital force, when we're wasting energy, when we are getting negative or getting too wrapped up in situations, circumstances, or the media that we really don't have any control of at the moment. So this vital force can be wasted or leaked. And very important to pay attention to where, if that's happening, where that's happening. Roy Davis was very adamant about this. Don't get too involved in superficial conversation. Don't get too involved in philosophizing. Be self-contained with your energy. Don't get into challenging other people's concepts or thoughts or beliefs. These are all ways to conserve our energies. But there's another part to this which I find quite interesting, and it's that we can build our vital force, and that's done by being conscious of the world around us and taking in beauty, impressions. They are like food for us. The most obvious source of positive impressions is nature. It's why we feel so good when we see a sunset. It's why we feel so good when we see a sunrise. It's why we feel so good when we see a beautiful flower. Sometimes we don't know exactly what it is. We're just, we get in all of these things. Well, that's food. That it's not literal food, but that is food for you. That is food for your energy, for your vitality. Great works of art, writings by enlightened people, sacred scriptures, poetry, music. All of these things give us energy. They reinforce our vital force. Excuse me. Then obviously the food. Every piece of food, if you're familiar with Ayurveda, if you're not, I encourage you to study it, because that and in fact, the Vedas, Ayurveda, the knowledge of the Vedas is paramount to this particular time period, because there's so much information there that shows us how to realign ourselves if we're out of alignment with nature, and that realignment will only increase our vitality. So I think stopping the wasting of energy, learning how to build our energy, and then nourishing ourselves with things like Ayurveda and the appropriate diet for our particular body type, I think is very important. So, there's lots more, obviously, that I could say about that. I do want to say one thing about the little technique that we ended the meditation with. That's called the inner smile. I learned that many, many years ago, maybe 20 years ago. It is essentially a technique from Qigong. Many of you are familiar with Qigong. Kathleen Reeling, one of the CSA ministers, is a teacher of Qigong. Steve Ridley. Roy always encouraged us to look into Tai Chi, Qigong, because it seemed to enhance our meditation and Kriya Yoga practice. But the inner smile, again, I'm going to mention something that Roy was very, heard him many, many times over the 35 years I knew him say, just be happy, just smile. And his last telephone recorded message, he used to do a weekly telephone message you could call in and listen to. The last one, I think Ron Lindon mentioned this, was pretty much just that: be happy. That is your real nature. That is your inner nature, to just be happy. Well, the inner smile is sort of an exercise in that contentment. So the body responds to our intention, to every thought we think, every emotion that we have. And by sort of directing that to the brain, the internal organs, again, this is a Qigong technique, many thousands of years old. There is a response within, a cellular response to that attitude, where blockages, stagnant energy, prana is allowed to circulate when we do these techniques. So I encourage you to try these things during your meditations. The inner smile is a great one to do if you wake up in the middle of the night and can't fall asleep. And you'll usually find that after just a few minutes, or sometimes a few seconds, that there's a shift that occurs, and the next thing you know, it's morning time. So anyway, I just thought I would put that in. So I wanted to open the floor now to any questions, and I'm happy to answer whatever I can. If I can't answer it, I will tell you. But anybody have any questions for me, please let us know. Pascal may give us some guidance here if there's challenges with unmuting and so on.
Yes, you can unmute yourself. There should be a little microphone by your name. So if you click on that, you should be able to unmute.
Hi. Can you hear me? This is Barbara Dockford. Okay, I do have a question about the inner smile. I read the part in your book where you said there is a video on the inner smile on your website. And I went on your website and it was wonderful. I listened to everything and looked at everything you've got on it, but I couldn't put my hands on that video. So can you guide?
It's an audio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But as I said, there's many versions of this. If you go to Google and do Inner Smile, you'll see there's got to be dozens of people teaching this now. Now, we do have the audio on our new website, which I probably should have mentioned. We do have a new website because of this new institute we're developing now that has a more spiritual emphasis and spiritual approach. The new website is IPI, which stands for Infinite Potential Institute, IPI.global. So if you go there, you'll see, you'll find the Inner Smile. I believe it's under media. And we just started that website, and we're starting to load it with more and more information. There'll be podcasts and more science blogs and other information as time goes on. Anyway, the Inner Smile is simple to learn. Once you've learned it and you sort of get the mechanism down, it's easy. I see somebody asked a question, is there a consumer level EEG available on the market? So let me just say something about that real quickly, Pascal. There's a couple of portable EEG devices. EEG stands for electroencephalography. They measure the brain, and they're used for feedback. So there's the main one, which you've probably seen advertisements for because it's everywhere. It's called the Muse, M-U-S-E. And I've been investigating that one for over a year now. It's pretty decent. It's not bad. It's a simple headband and then an app on the phone, very easy to use. My only problem with it is it's a one-size-fits-all protocol. There's literally thousands of things, actually 6,000 different parameters in the brain that you can train. Well, the Muse just uses some very basic, simple parameters because it's meant for the general public. So it's not a clinical device. But for what it costs and its simplicity, I know people who have been very, very satisfied with it. It helps with meditation. And there's actually a piece of software for clinicians that goes with the Muse, where a clinician can go in and modify the protocols that are already preset in the Muse, but the clinician can modify and individualize those protocols. And that is also quite effective. We have a number of our clients using that now for meditation purposes and, sort of attention, focus, concentration, even PTSD. So if you're interested, the one I would recommend is the Muse. Okay. Okay.
Marty, I had a question about your book, The Brain Sutras, which I've read and really, really enjoyed. One thing I found particularly helpful was the chapter about I think it was called Getting into the Gap. I wondered if you could maybe touch on that a little bit.
Sure. Getting into the gap is an interesting possibility or potential that we really have available to us. The way I explain it is there is a gap in our thought process. And in that chapter, I sort of show how the gap in some of our thinking can be associated with the gap between nerve cells in the brain, neurons. There's a place where there's a gap where a dendrite and an axon meet. And within that gap, what is determined is what direction those particular electrical activity that's running down the axon to the dendrite, it's within that gap that either an activation or inhibition is going to occur. An activation means a charging up, a stimulus, or an inhibition, a quieting down. So how would we translate that? Well, if we pay attention to the gaps between our thoughts we really have a choice where they go. There's a very fraction of a second, a little time frame, where if we pay attention to those little gaps between the thoughts, that instead of them going automatically and jumping to a usual train of negative thinking, if that happens to be the problem, we can interrupt that by really paying attention to what is happening in those gaps. Often the gaps are associated with breath. I've heard meditation teachers say, pay attention to the gap between the inhalation and the exhalation, and the gap between exhalation and inhalation, because that also gives us a little segue into changing what's happening in that particular moment. So getting into the gap is really about that practice of paying attention to the direction that the thoughts are going in, and then finding that point where we can interrupt them and direct them intentionally to where we want them to go. Again, the inner smile, what Mr. Davis used to say, just be happy. These are all attempts at changing the gap, changing the direction of the thought processes, interrupting them and stopping negative flows. Okay.
Hello, Marty. This is Walter speaking from Germany.
Hi, Walter.
Hi.
And Wilma. Hi.
I just thought about the things what you said before about this fight-flight. And actually, this fight-flight is also a certain kind of relief for a situation where it's very much tension. I just thought about what will happen to the people who are not meditator or didn't have any experience in this way, but are in the situation that they have to stay for 2-3 months maybe in the house and have no chance to release all this tension. And another thing I want to add to the meditation, what you recommend before, what Roy always reminded me, because when I went to Lakemont, it was always so wonderful, but to come back to normal life, it was sometimes not so easy. And asking him how to keep this energy and how to keep this wonderful feeling, he just reminded me always saying, keep your rhythm. And I think especially in this time, it's very important to keep your rhythm or create your daily things, what you do, what is important, and to follow this through.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And also, you're right, these people who are stuck in the house for 3 months and have no relief, again, as I mentioned earlier, the danger is getting into hopelessness and helplessness. But as we speak today, countries are opening up and people are getting out, and so that feeling of helplessness can be released and they can get their energy flowing again. But I think that finding a rhythm, finding a daily routine that works is essential for us, essential for everybody, but particularly for those of us who know what meditation is and how to use it. So do you find you're able to do that there, Walter? Are you able to maintain the rhythm from Lakemont now?
Yes, much better than before. Actually, we are now the 46th day in our house. And we just started the really first day to open an online meditation. We do this every day, and we keep busy with these things. I started also a study with Vedic astrology, and everything what you said before: eating good, going to sleep, going out, enjoy the nature, smile to people, even through your mask with your eyes, and staying focused. This is an incredible, wonderful time to grow.
It is. We have to use it. Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.
Marty, I have a question for you as well. Leonard Teamer.
Hi, Leonard.
How you doing today?
Good.
A great talk, by the way, as usual.
Thank you.
How much or how many studies have you observed as it relates to healing the body during meditation with proficient meditators?
There's quite a few out there. I think the studies aren't necessarily about healing, although you could call it healing, as they are about lowering blood pressure, improving, particular problems like migraine headaches, irritable bowel syndrome, even autoimmune disorders. So it's not. Honestly, I'm sort of searching in the back of my mind here for studies that actually say, oh, this person started meditating for this specific healing and this happened. They're more in terms of, you meditate and then you see all these other problems go away. So I think that if you want to email me, my wife has access through the universities to all kinds of research, particularly on meditation. So we can see if we can find something for you. But why don't you shoot me an email and I'll see what I can find, or Stella will.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody
Marty,
else?
I think Emerson has his hand up. Emerson, you have a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Oh, good. I had two issues. The first was your new site. Is it ipi.global?
Yes, Emerson, ipi.global.
I'm finding it hard to accept the fact that I may be in my home, Panther Brook, my center, for the rest of my life. I don't see, it may well be years, as you said earlier. It may not just be months, but it may be years, and I find that hard to accept, hard to live with, and the ramifications of that. I have one son, and he lives in Washington. He and his new wife, and I think that I told them that if they came down, they would have to isolate themselves in my center, in my spirit house, for 2 weeks before they could come into the house, and that kind of thing. It just it's very, very difficult to accept for me, and also the suffering that I know in the world. I had an occasion last week where I was doing my practice, and my heart was so filled with love, and I felt this incredible feeling of sympathy for all those people who are suffering. So I came down to the house and wrote over $3,000 worth of checks. And I was totally God intoxicated, is what I call it. And because we're not going anywhere, they were set on the dashboard of my car. And the next day, of course, I woke up sober and I wasn't God intoxicated. So I said, this is crazy. Who do I think I am? Daddy Warbucks or something? And so, but then I went back up to the spirit house and did my practice, and my heart opened again. Yeah. So I got into the car and drove to the post office and mailed those checks. And I don't know what else I can do, to be of help in this. And it's the fact that I don't see an end point to the end of it, other than catching the virus, possibly. That's about it.
No, this is a great challenge, and all of those, everything you're worried about and dreading is real. But there is a key here, and that is the key to remain present. And our imagination takes us to crazy places, and we imagine this, and we imagine I'm going to be stuck in this for years, and so on and so on. So I think making efforts to be present. I'm just right here, right now. I'm living, a day at a time, an hour at a time, or a minute at a time, whatever it takes. But just getting present, because what you're saying about this profound heart opening that you're having, that's it. That's present. That's doing more for the world than anything else, right? So you just watch where and I'm not just saying you, I mean, we all have to watch where our imagination is taking us in it, because we don't know.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we don't. And there's no sense in prophesizing the worst. We can only be where we are, go inside, take care of our inner state, and we have to let this universe do what it's doing right now, whatever the outcome. And that's really it. We can't be attached to any outcome here. So I feel for you, Emerson. I mean, I know what you're saying, but I can just see you like Santa Claus giving out checks every.
Well, it was quite amazing. The response I got from this, because this is very, as you know, this is very unlike me. I've never done anything like this. The response was amazing. I had a neighbor call up, and she was in tears, and said we did not know what we were going to eat tomorrow. And this check really made a difference.
Bless you. Yeah. Yeah. Just stay with your heart, stay present. Things will work accordingly.
Thank you.
I see a question from Lee Marsh. Lee mentions that in some of Yogananda's writings, he mentioned that focusing the eyes upward instead of horizontal, whether closed or not, kept the brain from drifting, daydreaming, versus keeping the eyes horizontal or below. Have there been any studies into this? Yes, there are some old studies that show, especially when you close your eyes and you lift your gaze up, there's a huge burst of alpha rhythm in the back of the brain, which is very healing rhythm. And we'll get into the whole description of what alpha is and what alpha does. So yes, Lee, there is actually research. If you look up a clinician, one of the pioneers in the field, Barbara Brown, she cites that particular study of where the eyes are being. Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
Hey, Marty, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for all your work you and your wife has done throughout the years in helping and healing people. Thank you so much for that. And I'd make a confession, haven't bought your book yet, but I am going to buy it.
Listen, there's a few typos in it that slipped past us, but I'm going through it now and fixing it. Plus, there's a few typos. Let me just put it that way.
Okay. Hey, I just had two questions. I was wondering, people who've been through a lot of trauma. I mean, violence and different things like that. Because sometimes in my meditation classes here on the East Side, I have people who've been through some violent things, and they have those what they call those blind spots where certain things would just trigger them. And they would think of different things happening. So, what would, as far as meditation and I love that smile, qigong. I'm definitely going to use that. Could you give some key points on that as far as maybe I can use as far as helping people like that or things that you know?
Yeah, if a person has severe trauma, repressed trauma. Meditation isn't always the best place to start, as you're seeing.
Okay.
Techniques that involve the body more, Tai Chi, Qigong, that involve movement and breath tend to be better. I've worked with prison populations, just a study's on pause now, but I kicked off a study, which you've probably heard about in California, with parolees. And some of these guys just can't meditate because as soon as they close their eyes, and they start quieting, well, everything that's been held back jumps out, and that's what you're seeing.
Okay.
So preliminary things to that, as I just said, are things like Qigong, Tai Chi, the inner smile, things that use the body, and sort of more moving meditations seem to be better at that stage of the game.
Okay. Wonderful. And also, did Swami Rama, when he first came over, didn't he do some show some yoga techniques back during the 70s that some clinic.
Yeah, he went to the Menninger Foundation. Dale Walters, who was a colleague of mine, and Elmer Green, there at the Menninger Clinic. This was in Topeka, Kansas. They moved to Wichita. So they did a lot of studies on him. But the main technique that he used was Yoga Nidra. And Swami Rama could basically go into whatever brain state they asked him to. He could stop his heart. He could make the temperature on either side of his palm vary by 17 degrees Fahrenheit. So he was controlling blood flow. Roy knew him and once told me he could also make perfume exude from the palms of his hands. I don't know about that. But yeah, he had spent years and years in the Himalayas. He went to his guru when he was 5 or 6 years old, I believe. His parents said okay, and he studied in Hardwar, Rishikesh, and spent a year in a cave blindfolded. And of course, when you do that, a lot of the yogic powers known as siddhis, soul abilities do unfold. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you, appreciate you.
Okay. A little note here from Kathleen Reeling. If any of you are from Rabid County, that the Muse, this headband I was just describing to you for brainwave biofeedback, is available at the Rabid County Library. Thanks, Kath, for letting us know. Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay, I guess that's it for today. Great to see you, and hopefully we'll see each other in a different format in the not too distant future. But thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'll be doing one afternoon per program now for a while, along with, I see Leotis here, and several other CSA ministers as well will be participating. We all have a lot of experience in the spiritual path, so I think you'll glean a ton of knowledge and real applicable information by tuning in. Pascal, thank you so much for being the hostess there.
Thank you, Marty.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, everybody. Love you.
Thank you. Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.